But since then, I have tried to go back as often as I could and re-examine, kind of go through the rubble of the deconstruction and continue to look for meaning there and not be closed off to, because you don't ever want to find yourself closed off to true things and real things and meaningful things and important things for you. You don't want to find yourself closed off to those things and losing those things only because you associate them with something you're now actively detaching from. Sometimes there are very important, beautiful, meaningful things that need to come with you. It's understandable that you can't bring them with you immediately. Sometimes you need to cauterize, and that does make sense. But taking the time later, once you feel a safe distance, to go back and say, "Oh, like this is a thing that I actually still really resonates with me." And so maybe I'm going to assign new meaning to it. I'm going to think about it in a different way than I did before. But it is a thing I want to keep thinking about.
Welcome to The Sacred Slope, a podcast for those of us who were raised to love God, live by the golden rule, and love our neighbors as ourselves, but who are stunned that those foundational calls no longer seem to shape many of the communities we once trusted. What happens when the fruits of the Spirit that are supposed to mark Christians, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, can be hard to recognize, especially in those shouting the name of Jesus loudest? Recognizing this disconnect wasn't something we chose. It struck us without warning, leaving the landscape of our faith transformed and launching us into an unwanted journey of grief. Some of us have quietly set our faith aside, too exhausted to continue wondering how the morals we grew up with no longer match those of many self-professed evangelicals. Others, including many of our LGBTQ plus sisters and brothers who have faced rejection and cruel condemnation, carry scars too deep to even look back. Many of us have felt disoriented, unable to reconcile the rigid black and white frameworks we inherited with a Jesus who embraced outcasts, challenged religious hypocrisy, and preached radical, unconditional love. The Jesus we still can't help but be drawn to. Have you ever wondered if your reactions to the disconnect that you're experiencing between what you were taught and what you've witnessed firsthand aren't obstacles to faith, but maybe they're signposts instead? What if that grief that is tearing at your chest is honoring something that once meant everything to you? And what if that rage burning in your lungs is recognizing holy injustice when you see it, where others are choosing to look away? What if that confusion circling your mind marks your courage to leave certainty behind? And that curiosity, that small, persistent spark of wonder peeking through the cracks of what you thought you knew? What if it's worth following? Maybe curiosity is how resurrection begins. Perhaps all of it matters. The fear, the grief, the wonder, the rage, the loneliness. What if you're not falling down a slippery slope? What if this is the work? What if deconstruction isn't the end of your faith, but the beginning? What if all this time you have been walking on sacred ground? Welcome to The Sacred Slope, a podcast for the deconstructing, the disillusioned, and the deeply hopeful. I'm Alexis Rice, and I'm so glad you're here.
We're going out's like a war zone. I hope everybody comes home. You never know which neighbor's gonna turn on you. You can't judge them by a flag, 'cause if you do, oh, it's the pot and the kettle black. What's the difference when the attack is at your door? And your body is your one defense. You gotta draw away the fire from your friends. And it's just so easy to see when you look at me. Oh, I can read that energy. secrets written on your face, and all it takes is a little bit of nail polish.
Welcome back, friends. I'm so excited to introduce to you today Derek Webb. Derek, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Derek Webb is a singer-songwriter that so many of you are going to recognize. His music has carried us through seasons of certainty and unraveling, from his early days with Caedmon's Call to his solo work, which is really deeply confessional and really courageously political. So Derek's never shied away from wrestling with God in public and church and doubt and justice. And that is why I admire you so much.
Oh,
Your 2023 album, The Jesus Hypothesis, what's so cool about it is it really sounded like both a dare and a prayer at the same time. um,
that's great.
you were asking these questions. You were doing all these kind of deconstruction, reconstruction questions that never really quite left you. Like, who is Jesus really? And like,
Right.
who gets to say who's Jesus? And if you stay in the room long enough with that doubt, like, will God still meet you there?
Yeah.
Is that kind
That's
of,
great.
yeah?
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, and I appreciate you mentioning that record. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like going back. I think I've seen a lot of my friends go through what, you some people call deconstruction. I always use the air quotes because the thing about this term deconstruction, it's helpful for some things. If it's a banner under which people can gather and find other people who are journeying alongside, then and it helps you find community and things like that, then that's great. But anytime you ask 10 people to define a word for you and you get 10 different definitions, you should stop using that word immediately because it doesn't mean anything. And you don't know what you're agreeing to when you use it. You don't know what agreements you're making when you say something online about deconstruction or your deconstruction. You just have no idea what anybody is hearing, what their definitions of words like that tend to be. And so sometimes it just winds up being bad communication because you're saying a thing and someone's hearing you say something completely different because they have a very different understanding of a word. But for our purposes here, I don't mind. I guess I sabotage the shorthand by giving that explanation. But the point being, uh, my friends, whenever they'd gone through something like a deconstruction or an audit of all of your presumptions about invisible reality, maybe is a different way of saying it, which is to say it's a thing you should do regularly, not a thing you do once. But whenever they do that, what rarely happens is my friends rarely tend to go back to the thing and the place where they deconstructed or the thing that they deconstructed. I hear a lot of folks once they go through a thing, a moment or season like that, a process like that, they'll say, "Now I'm just open to anything, and I'm just listening, and I'm just learning so much. I'm open to like everything now." And what they tend to mean is, "I'm open to everything other than the thing that I've previously come from, and that I'm not open to." And the thing about that is like it's I mean, there's that you could say, the baby in the bathwater. You could also say like maybe like God doesn't get everything in the divorce. There's a lot of things that maybe are fundamental and important parts of your personality that were developed over time along with your spirituality that maybe now you're deconstructing out of. That doesn't mean that you suddenly have to not have all those parts. You get to bring those things with you, and you get to assign new meaning to those things, and they get to occupy a new place. And so, in the last few years, since I think I put out in 2017, there was a record called Fingers Crossed kind of the that was kind of the moment. That was kind of the inflection point for me in terms of my work, where I started to really talk a lot about it was that record was kind of a tale of two divorces. I was going through personal things. I was also going through spiritual things. It's documented a lot on that record. But since then, I have tried to go back as often as I could and re-examine, kind of go through the rubble of the deconstruction and continue to look for meaning there and not be closed off to, because you don't ever want to find yourself closed off to true things and real things and meaningful things and important things for you, you don't want to find yourself closed off to those things and losing those things only because you associate them with something you're now actively detaching from. Sometimes there are very important, beautiful, meaningful things that need to come with you. It's understandable that you can't bring them with you immediately. Sometimes you need to cauterize. And that does make sense. But taking the time later, once you feel a safe distance, to go back and say, "Oh, like, this is a thing that I actually still really resonates with me. And so maybe I'm gonna assign new meaning to it. I'm gonna think about it in a different way than I did before." But it is a thing I wanna keep thinking about. And so, G's Hypothesis is a record like that. I mean, it really did kinda go back and really, really sort through, um and even the Targets record, which was the record that directly followed that Fingers Crossed record, was a lot of the same. But I feel like it's a thing I'll probably continue to do in my work, only because I continue to do it in my real life. I mean, my work is a direct reflection of my real life and my real processing. And so, in as far as I continue to be very curious about invisible reality, and I continue to have uncertainty about invisible things like God, and uncertainty about unknowable things like the future, I can't stop thinking about them. And so I will continue to labor over that. And as far as I do that, I'll keep making work about it. But yeah.
Yeah, you're it's really a good point of what you talk about. The word deconstruction is super annoying too. I find it doesn't capture everything that people are going through. I still try to find other words for it. It's like detangling or untangling maybe is just like
Yeah.
really going back to the basics. And then kind of the purpose of this particular podcast and project is that I'm thinking of it more of a zooming out.
Yeah.
Let's just realize that, like, some of us grew up with a specific lens, and that is a lens that many people live their Christian faith through.
Yes.
But if we zoom out and look at the entire world, there's 1 in 3 people on the planet that identify with the Christian faith. So they have been changed and revolutionized somehow through Jesus that they try
Yeah.
to follow. But there are also thousands of denominations and 6,000 languages and just thousands of different cultures, traditions, and ways of practicing this faith all over the world, right? Just
Yeah.
this
Yep.
one faith. And so thinking that there is one lens that owns the corner on all these thousands of denominations
Right.
is not the actual picture. And so I think it's a really beautiful and sacred journey, not a
Mhm.
slippery slope, to just go, let's widen the lens and learn from other people who are trying to figure this out and follow Jesus in different ways,
Right.
or were rooted in Jesus stuff and have taken certain values and are trying to connect with the divine,
Yeah.
and kind of build bridges. So I wish we
Yes.
could find a word that's better than deconstruction. So
Yeah.
if you have any ideas.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that sums it up. I mean, there are some questions that just don't have short answers. And the world on the internet especially tends to hate those kind of things, and it demands short answers. And that's where I think especially evangelicals get in trouble, is when they start trying to give short answers to questions for which there are no short answers. But yeah, I mean, deconstruction probably works fine as a shorthand, as long as you know who you're talking to. But and again, as a banner under which to gather and find your people, I think it can be really helpful. I think is in terms of a prescription, I don't love it, especially because it doesn't seem to hold space for, like, it doesn't. The thing I like about the idea of, like, an audit of your presumptions or your opinions about invisible reality, your an audit of your opinions about invisible, unknowable things about which you cannot have certainty. You just can't have certainty, like measurable scientific certainty about invisible things like God and unknowable things like the future. You just can't be certain about them. You can have faith, and your faith can express itself in the language of certainty, but you can't really have certainty about it. And so I think anything like that, I think it's important to have a regular, like, perennial, like a regular examination of that stuff. Because what happens to a lot of what has happened to a lot of my evangelical friends is they go through a kind of early mature critical thinking stage. It happens to most people around late high school, early college, and that's where they kind of start owning some things and believing some things. They start to really put their weight on some things. The problem that about that process for most people, at least the way that it's done in this in my community and with my friends, is you go from kind of the critical thinking, exploratory kind of phase, which is where you find it and you do your initial thinking, your initial kind of, scaffolding of the belief and all of whatever it is. Um, but then you kind of quickly move out of that into the kind of plant your flag, defend the castle stage, which really discourages, even implicitly discourages more critical thinking about that thing. And it really discourages coming into new information because you wind up with some non negotiables that you think are important to stop thinking about because maybe your eternal salvation and the eternal salvation of your whole family is tied up in these few things being correct. And so if you come into new information about them, it almost sounds like tempting fate to knock you off of your eternal footing a little bit. And that sounds dangerous. It sounds scary. Um, but wouldn't you want to know? Would you really want to get to the end of your life and realize, oh, I should have thought more critically about some of this because maybe this version of God that I have put all my faith in and my belief in is, you know, one third a real God and two thirds my cultural presumptions, bias, and personality and experience, and I've kind of Frankensteined a God together, me and some of my friends, which would speak to why there are literally like what 40 or 50,000 denominations just in the Protestant church, and so it's like that's what we're all doing. I mean, and some as there's a song on GS Hypothesis that speaks to this, and with a very efficient phrase, which is just some gods deserve atheists. And sometimes deconstruction, as we call it, is just becoming an atheist to a not real God in order to hold space for a real one to show up if there is one. And but the one that we've constructed, and maybe want a God that we have made up of everything that we've gotten wrong about God. Um, you maybe you need to be an atheist to that God. Um, and really everybody should be comfortable with the idea and the practice of atheism, and here's why. Because everybody is an atheist, and what do I mean by that? Like, unless you're still believing in Zeus
Mhm.
and Baal, and I mean, name any one of the hundreds of thousands, millions of gods of the ancient world, all of which we don't believe in anymore.
Mhm.
Um, some people just go one God further than you,
Yeah.
if you're an evangelical, but all of us are atheists
Mhm.
to thousands of gods.
Yeah.
And so this is not an unfamiliar practice.
Right.
It's not hard to disbelieve. So I think it's important, especially with the stakes being high, especially if you do think there is some scale and in the balance is hanging the eternal salvation or something of you and your friends and your family.
Mhm.
It really matters that you think critically about it. And it really matters that if there's deconstruction to be done, and if it turns out some of the God that you're putting your faith in is made up of your opinions and your personality quirks and the particular biases of your friend group or your community or the part of the world in which you were born, you want to know that.
Mhm.
And you want to make sure and you want to find your way. There was a great quote, and I wish I could remember it because I say it a lot. I should really look up who said this, but a great philosopher, theologian once said that if a God can be killed, it must be killed.
Mm.
And and really sanctification or like spiritual growth is kind of maybe could be the process of trying to kill every God you meet
Mhm.
until you find one that you can't kill. And maybe you're onto something at that point. But you have to keep trying to kill it.
Mm.
Because that's the only way that you're gonna and maybe that's what deconstruction or the audit of your assumptions about these things and your opinions about these things, maybe that's kinda what it is. It's just the constant process of testing it and saying, "I'm gonna lean my full weight. I can't see it, but I'm gonna lean my full weight on it to feel if it can hold me and to continue to see if my experience with it continues to ring true, or
Mm.
if a broken clock is right twice a day. So I look at it and it appears to have knowledge, or it appears to know something, because it's the circumstances of my day played out in such a way that the only explanation could be that there's something behind it all. Well, I understand that, and I understand that that can happen, but what about the billion other series of circumstances and opportunities where things played out in a completely chaotic and random sequence? We only comment about, like, "Oh, isn't that just like the Lord?" And like, "Look, that proves it, because look at how all that happened in just that certain way, and there's meaning to it." What about every other moment of every other day, the billions of other moments of every other day where that does not happen? That is the majority of the evidence, I hate to tell you. And the random, even statistically, occasionally things are going to play out in such a way where it's just coincidental. And you're like,
Mhm.
how in the world was I just thinking of that person? And then they just called me and needed the one thing I just had. That is just going to happen sometimes, gang, because we live in a world of constant variables and constant, you just don't realize it. Life doesn't feel, because we're experiencing it in a linear way. So we're not thinking about it that way. But at every point, there's a million other choices that were possible. And so statistically, occasionally things are going to occur in a sequence that appears to have meaning. All that really means is that maybe a broken clock is right twice a day. So it doesn't prove anything, but it also is something, yes, that we should pay attention to. But let's continue to think about it. Let's not say, "Oh, look at that. That happened and that happened, that happened. Well, that explains it. And
Yeah.
and now I'm done. And I'm not gonna think about it anymore." Please don't ever do that. Please
Yeah.
continue to think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. One of the books that I think that has helped me in my path as a scholar, Bible scholar, Pete Enns, and he wrote a book
Oh,
called
yes.
The Sin of Certainty, and
Yeah, that's great.
it's just such a good way of thinking. Like, okay, yeah, a lot of us are, we were raised in binaries, right? And also in the United States, we happen to have a political system which is very binary, which, like, in Europe, it's not like
Yes.
that. Like, there's a lot of different parties. People may not identify with one party all the time. They switch
Right.
depending on the election a lot more. And so we just have kind of that thinking. And so what I've noticed in the last
Mm.
decade or so is that because we were raised in such certainty over here, and it's like, if you're not certain, then if you don't jive with, like, all the stuff that's happening or some of the stuff that you feel is toxic, like, for example, like, I have friends or family in the LGBTQ plus community, and my church that I'm attending is really harming them. And so I can't be in this church anymore. Well, then it's like, well, I think I'm certain that I have to be over here and not have any faith in any divine at all, because that must be the other side of certainty. And so I've noticed a lot of people are in this, and the work is that nuance that you're talking about. The work is that, well, maybe we don't
Right.
have to be here or here. The
Right.
certainty is actually what's I think prohibiting us anywhere we're landing on growth,
Yeah, I
right?
totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Well, and it completely explains the path to Christian nationalism. It just explains it. Because if we are de-incentivized to think critically in an ongoing way about our opinions about invisible reality, then of course we're just going to take the bait every time and say, "Oh, well, if A plus B plus C plus D, then that means now that, I guess, this church that I'm attending, that it now seems to be really heavily endorsing a political candidate, seems to be very anti-Christ and is bringing about a reality that seems to be contrary to everything, all the priorities that Jesus seemed to care about, which was getting into the maximum trouble based on how you relate to the marginalized." And
Amen.
and so if that's, but even though you see it happening right in front of you, you're like, "Well, yeah, but I keep going back to A plus B plus C plus D," and that just says, "Well, but I'm in this church and it has this authority and it is infallible or inerrant in these ways, or I have to trust it, or I'm under its authority for these reasons. So I have to go along with this." And you continue to say, "Okay, well, now that's part of my equation. Now it's A plus C plus D," and now apparently the church's connection to and opinions on government and society and culture seem to get kind of just come in as amendments on the bill, and now all of a sudden we have to take all that too, and now that becomes part of plant the flag, defend the castle. It becomes part. Now it's like, no, but this is our candidate, and no, but this is our party, and no, but these are our values, and no, but this is, and you can't question, and you're literally taught to not question any of it, because you have to have certainty about all this, and
Mm.
it starts extending out to your civil responsibilities, and it starts to extend out to your treatment of neighbor, and it starts to extend out to all this other stuff. And you feel as though to question it is to pull the thread and unravel the structure of eternal salvation. If that's part of what you're believing in and including in it, if that's part of it for you. And so suddenly to doubt the rightness of Donald Trump and all of his policies starts to feel like doubting inerrancy or doubting the existence of heaven or hell. I mean, it's like it starts to just get baked in. It gets really tricky really fast, is what it does. That's why ongoing, regular, perennial, habitual
Yeah.
deconstruction, whatever you want to call it, you have to, you know, think critically. If that causes you to change your opinions, then think critically about those changed opinions in time.
Yes, totally. It's
And
an ongoing
then
journey that's never over.
it has to continue to churn. And that is spirituality. I hate to tell everybody, but it's like
Yes.
that is spiritual practice. That the practice of spirituality is to never stop trying to kill all the gods you identify. I mean, again, like to never stop doubting if the doubts are leading you somewhere. So you have to pull that thread in real time to run right behind it. Never stop pulling that thread. You have to do it, because if you don't, in 5 seconds you run the risk of being a Christian nationalist. No one sees that coming. No one understands the path they're on. I think a lot of folks, especially in America, who have wound up there couldn't have imagined ever being there, could not have ever imagined even softly supporting or defending straight Nazism and Nazi tactics and Nazi paraphernalia, like things that extreme. I think a lot of good people never could have imagined it, never could have imagined giving some countenance to blatant homophobia, racism, bigotry. And yet it is now kind of slowly getting baked right into their worldviews because of the way their churches are marrying themselves to the state, and not just the state, but a very particular candidate and party, and not even a particular party, but literally something that's being rewritten in real time right in front of us. And being redefined, words are being redefined in extremely dangerous ways right now. And so people like my parents' age and my friends' parents' ages, who might have, grown up very conservative and straight ticket Republican, they're still playing that same game. They're still playing with those same words, but that doesn't mean what it meant before. Now it literally means propping up dictators. And it literally means, it's just crazy when you get lazy about language, which is why this practice is so important. And not just to do in your spirituality, to do in your civics, and to do in the way you engage with culture and society. You have to do it everywhere constantly. You have to be looking at your language and trying to figure out where the inconsistencies are and where things are getting out of harmony, and bringing those things back into consistency and be like, you know what? I still feel like I identified this way, and I still think this seems right to me, and this approach or these values or this perspective. But here's these things that seem kind of new, and I'm not down with that part of it. And I need to do the hard work of sitting in the complexity of that, and not continuing to take the cheap, easy way out of continuing to identify with a certain big category or word or worldview, and not keep short receipts where I see things that make no sense with it. Because if you do that, it's all coming in, and before you know it, you're just gonna be in a mob of people storming the Capitol, and you're not gonna have any idea how you got there.
Totally.
And that is the most dangerous thing that's happening right now. People, I think good intentioned people who are winding up in every way, facilitating, propping up, and literally being the wind in the sails of real evil. That is what's happening.
Yeah. And holding a lot of Christian flags at the same time and praying.
They're marching in with them, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's heartbreaking for a lot of us who also grew up really knowing that, like, this was our community. These are our people. We understand where they're coming from.
Right.
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 And so that is like, I know some people that have never been, just really can't understand or fathom. But when you see that, and you see the Christian flags, and you see the praying, and you go, oh, I get it. I know where this is coming from. But yes, it's so important. And it's been like, what can people who still hold on to Jesus in some way do about this, who don't agree, and who find this so dangerous? And One thing that I find really interesting is that even in the last election in the United States, over half of Democrats and independents still identify as Christian.
Right.
But like, how are
Another
we?
word that literally means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ask 10 different people to define it, you'll get 10 different answers. And so
Yes.
it's not a word that means anything,
Mm-hmm.
but it does
Yes.
tell you something. It tells you something about
Yes.
where these people are coming from. Yeah.
Totally. And what I think is interesting is that none in particular category that you're talking about is like, I'm not gonna use a label.
Yeah.
The majority of people who voted Democrat were raised in Christian homes in the United States.
Right.
So also speak Christianese and also understand. And I believe, and I wonder what you think about, I don't know that they're necessarily rejecting all of Jesus or all of God or all of spirituality, but they're like, that's not it. But what other
Right.
options are there for me? Right. And so
Right.
approaching, like you said, with a curiosity, and breaking down gatekeepers and saying, hey,
Yes.
there are people all over the world, billions and billions of people who celebrate this faith. And there are people who have spent their lives in seminaries, getting their doctorates, who are all made in the image of God, who have a lot to teach us, who also
Yes.
are at the Black Lives Matter rallies and who
Yes.
are at the pride parades. And
Yeah.
if that is attractive, we should be learning from these leaders who know something about the heart of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting in progressive media right now, in a lot of new media spaces, there aren't that many conversations despite the fact that a lot of us, most of us, grew up, in the Christianese language.
Yes. Yeah. Like you're just implying and talking about is like when I hear a term like "Make America Great Again," I think of when prophetic movements of speaking truth to power and challenging unjust laws and challenging unjust patterns in our government and things like that literally were coming up out of churches. I mean, the civil rights movement came out of black churches. I mean, it's like
Yep.
the church tended to be those holding the arms up of people who were trying to do this work and were kind of the subversive force behind all of it.
Mhm.
And when and it's just it's crazy to me how if you just kind of put a pin there and now look at how it is today and the way that the church has now become so co-opted because politicians have learned to speak our I say ours though I don't have a dog in that fight anymore, but politicians have learned to speak the language of evangelicalism and learn to speak the language of Western Christianity um, and it just and once you just learn to speak the language and you can just you can co-opt people. And it's so funny that like it makes the character of Jesus very relevant because he seems to me to be a person who resisted the concentration of power and the practice of power and the gathering and the holding
Yeah.
of power. It was the upside down kingdom the way that he talked about it and practiced it. And so it's like and yet Christians are so enamored with the idea of power, and they're no different than the Christians of the first century who received the historical person of Jesus into the world, who wanted him to be a king, wanted him to come in and sit on a throne and have their enemies at his feet. And it said he rode in on a donkey and he identified himself with poor and marginalized people. And he was very anti-empire. And that was very frustrating for people who had a very specific idea of what he was going to look like and what he was there to accomplish. It's exactly the same thing you're seeing in 2025. You're seeing a lot of Christians under the banner of Christianity being very pro empire and being so allured and enamored by the idea of power that they'll just sacrifice everything in order to align themselves with power and sit with power and go and be close to power in the White House or whatever it might be. And you see all these Christian people doing precisely, I mean, you just wonder what would happen if, and I feel like I know exactly what would happen. I was about to say, if Jesus showed up on the scene, he would be deported immediately,
Mhm.
is what would happen.
Yeah.
Um, and the real Christians would be the ones fighting for, his ability to stay in the country and
Mhm.
to do the work of caring for the poor. And, it's like, Jesus' reputation was ruined because of the degree to which he loved and lived his life with marginalized people.
Mhm.
That was why he was in all of his trouble. All the people who empire saw as complex and of low value,
Yep.
those were all the people Jesus spent all of his time with. And that made empire so angry
Mhm.
that it led to, the story played out precisely the way it did, but it was a result of Jesus spending all of his time and aligning his life and reputation with people who were at that time were seen as the most complex people in culture, the marginalized people.
Yes.
And so people now will say, well, oh, but it's, like, it's complicated though to say like, oh, well, where does, where does God, where would Jesus, what would Jesus do when it comes to immigrants and marginalized people and women, people of color and queer people? Like, what would Jesus? Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. You can't put words in. No, I don't think it's that hard. I think it's very easy. And I think all you have to ask
Yeah.
yourself is look at culture in 2025 and tell me where are the marginalized people?
Yeah.
Where are people being marginalized? And
Yep.
I'm not asking who they are, and I'm asking who's marginalizing them. It's empire who has the power to marginalize, because
Mhm.
empire are the ones who are centering themselves in the story always.
Yes.
And so, where are marginalized people? Okay, well, that's where Jesus would be. That's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not asking how complicated are those people, or what do those people's lives or legal statuses aligning with anything that you have a moral opinion about.
Mhm.
I don't care about that. Where are marginalized people? That's where Jesus would be. Because the same thing could be said of all the people who Jesus hung with. Like, well, what about moral opinions about their statuses and about their genders and about their whatever it may be? Yeah, that's exactly the same thing. I mean, everybody was saying, why are you hanging with women? Why are you dignifying women? Why are you hanging with people of lower caste? Like, why are you with lepers? Why are you with lower, people who like, those aren't the
Yeah.
people.
Why are you having dinner with sex workers?
Why are you aligning with sex workers
Yep.
and people of low status and culture? Why are you doing that?
Mhm.
And it's exactly the same. And anybody who says it's not, they're willfully ignorant about the way the whole thing is set up. And that's
Yeah.
what's so disheartening about it, because all of it is a very confusing advertisement for Jesus.
Yes, and
Yeah.
the fact that there are so many millions of people who are still following and fiercely advocating for the marginalized on behalf of their belief in Jesus as the
Right.
as the way to know how to treat others and
Right.
to have a spiritual connection with the divine.
Yeah.
Where are we? On the right? On the progressive side, like, where are we standing up, like, and saying, like, "Yes, in the name of Jesus, we are going to be the ones who are caring for the
Yeah.
marginalized." And
Yeah.
pivoting to your newest release, and talking about really caring for people who need love and support, your new
Yeah.
album, Survival Songs.
Queer kid, where you gonna live now? Good kid, always getting kicked out of every place. You're not safe to be just who you are. Brave kid, only you define you. But hey kid, we're right behind you, so make your way. Say your name and show 'em who you are.
This is a powerful act of solidarity with the
Mm.
LGBTQ plus community, just in time for Pride, which is such a joyous time to
Yeah.
celebrate the beauty and all the people who were made in the image of God as they are, who have
Yep.
so much to teach us as humans, who don't see the world maybe the way everybody else does. And that's why we have community and learn from each other. So
Right.
I'd love to hear more about this project that is so full of heart. It's full of grief. It's full of hope. These songs they're tender, they're defiant, they're full of compassion for those who were told they don't belong in their local church spaces. I really want to emphasize here, though, that there are so many church spaces around the world who do fully define and affirm and are led even by queer people who, for example, the Episcopal Church has moved on from this 25 years ago, and openly ordain people in the queer community. I've had several leaders, pastors, people who've taken communion next to me, people serving in church who are trans, who are gay, who are queer. And there are other churches out there that are O&A churches, open and affirming, which means that it's a safe space.
Yes.
So talking about language, it bothers me the word the church, because the church is not a monolith. It is over
No,
2 billion people.
there is not one the church.
Yes.
There's no such thing. Yeah.
So I would love to learn more about where this project has come from. I've told you before, I can't not cry every time I hear several of these. And I am a straight person, but I have a lot of people in my life, and stories change people, right? Knowing people changes people, and music changes people. And that's why I think what you're doing is so important. So can you
Thank
tell
you
us,
for that. Sure.
yeah, can you tell us a little bit about this project and why you're doing it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for asking, and thanks for spending time with the songs and listening to it. I mean, I am a straight cisgender white man. This is not inherently my community. This is not inherently my fight, and therefore I am not a leader in that space remotely, nor could I possibly be. But I have so many loved ones, my literal family and best friends, community, who I have been watching the ground beneath them just shrink and shrink and shrink. There was a point at the beginning of this year that it dawned on me that even as a straight ally and family member and friend to folks in the queer community, that it was important for me to address this in my work to an extent that I hadn't before. So I decided, okay, if I could, and mainly because of what I'm seeing in the statistics around, especially queer and trans youth, who I think are at such risk in culture right now because of the way they're just being squeezed, and they're being told that they're not only not welcome in faith communities, they're being told that they're not welcome in their own bodies. They're being told that they don't exist, and yet they're being weaponized. And so, it's like it's very confusing, especially for queer youth. That's a hard enough time when you're just figuring yourself out and your identity and how you express yourself to the world, and to have all these additional layers of weight that 2025 is putting on folks. It to me felt like an emergency, that there need to be more songs, there needs to be more soundtrack to accompany folks who are going through extremely hard and impossible circumstances, and people who love those folks, their family, their allies, to encourage and empower them. And so I thought, well, I'm probably not the best person to do it, but it's something I feel like I can contribute and I should contribute. And so I immediately reached out to all of my friends in the queer and trans community, many of whom were artists. I sent dozens of texts out in every direction once I decided I wanted to make this record, and what I wanted it to be about, who I wanted it to be for, and and just got all the help I could and all the perspective I could and all the blessing that I could, to approach this. And I asked a lot of my friends, if you could sit for 1 minute in front of your adolescent or teenage self, and you could grab that kid by the shoulders and look them in the face, and you could say one quick thing to them that you feel like could be meaningful, could be helpful, that could help keep them alive in 2025, what could that be? And I got so much, and I asked of just dozens of my friends this, and I got so much unbelievable, beautiful response to that. And with their leadership and under their guidance and with their help and with their blessing, a lot of that language found its way in a lot of these songs, along with my very personal and my own experience and stories in relationships with and walking alongside of my loved ones and my community, and seeing what's happening and seeing the way they're being treated and seeing how the world, from my perspective, how the world treats them and how the world feels to them, and talking to them about that. And so that's what the record is. It's 40 minutes long. I tried to make it short, and hopefully it's some solidarity and it's some helpful, encouraging, empowering language, and hopefully for people whose lives are hanging in the balance, as many folks are, there's enough to get them through at least that hour. But for me, it's the most deeply personal work I've ever done in 30 years that I've been in this line of work. I've never done anything that's more personal. And yet it's the first album I've ever made that for which I am not the primary demographic. So it only took me 30 years to finally decenter myself, which is such a awful and common story when it comes to straight white men.
We're learning, though. It's a journey.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, 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 and so I just think a lot about it. I think a lot about how I can be in constant solidarity with my trans and queer friends and family. And a lot of that's covered on this record. And, so that's how it came into the world. I mean, it was a very unexpected record. I even started the year not knowing what I would write about and how to even, I mean, the thing I've kind of said to some others is that, like, I consider it my job, or any creative's job really, to look at the world and describe it. That's kind of the job. That's how you approach the work. Look at the world, tell us what you see. And I, over the last couple of years, have had an increasingly hard time doing that. I've not known how to do my job. I've not known how to describe the world I'm looking at. Because when you look around, it has just felt like everywhere you look, everything is on fire. And you want to run and you want to help. But when everything's on fire, how do you even choose what direction to run in?
Right.
It's paralyzing, and it's easy to just get stuck and not know what to do, and
Yes.
really and be full of despair, and get stuck there. But if you look long enough, everybody will eventually see the one fire for them that is the tallest. And that is the one that has to come down first. And you have to bring that fire down in order to get it, a fire you can't get around, you cannot see past, that you have to deal with. Because, like, do there need to be entire albums written about what's happening for women in the world right now and for women's rights? Absolutely. Do there need to be whole albums about people of and about people of color? Yes. Do there need to be whole albums about what's happening in Palestine? Yes. Do there need to be whole albums about what's happening in the immigrant community, especially in America right now? Yes. For me, the tallest fire, me personally, the tallest fire that I couldn't see past or get past was the impossible world that my queer and trans friends and family were having to live in. And I needed to deal with that fire first. And that's why survival songs got written.
I mean, I think what's so interesting, the way you talked about that, is you're saying, hey, this is not my community, but you took all your time, energy, and resources and love and care. You first listened to the community, and then you said, what do you need?
Yeah.
And then how can I help? And I think, like, for those of us who feel just paralyzed in despair, right? And just like, what can I do? I'm one person, right? It's like, to me, it's always looking back at, like, the example of Jesus, which was service. It was just like, then go find something. Go find, if you care about something that you see suffering in the world and you're like, where is God? It's like, God is in you. Go. Like, we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus. So
It's
just
in the mirror.
whether or not we use that label, like, we are supposed to be, that is what Jesus was trying to teach, is like, as humans, as human beings, our job is to see suffering and pain and to go help and to learn how to help,
Yeah.
right? And so what I find so important in what you said is, like, yeah, I know it's not your community, but we need advocates that are outside of our communities that are saying, hey, like, we need your help. And I was thinking about your song, Stay Safe, right? And Stay Safe, like, that is the one that, like, it is haunting and so sincere.
It does not require bravery to face the world as I am. Between assumption and reality, I'm an ordinary man. But I see you've weighing life and death every day in your skin. You're just fighting for integrity outside matching what's within. And I'm with you in the fight, but my heart can't bear to count the cost for you to stay safe out in the open. I want you free, but I need you alive. You gotta stay safe wherever you're going. If I just can't be by your side.
And it's, I'd love for you to talk a little about that. But one of the things that it says is, I want you free, but I need you alive.
Yeah.
And that also hits me, like, just listening from my perspective, even as a woman, and thinking about, it's built into our culture that, like, if a woman is walking, home alone at night, that, like, if you're a friend and you're a man, you just accompany her to stay safe.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
that's a thing that really matters. I am here for you. Like, I am here when you need me. Tell me what you need. And I feel like that's
Right.
what you're doing for the LGBTQ plus community. So can you talk a little bit more about that song, Stay Safe, and what that
Yeah.
means to you?
The song, specifically for me, it's a really emotional song to sing. I mean, the whole record is really this is the most emotional batch of songs that I've ever tried to have to perform live, which I'm grateful to
Mhm.
be able to do, but it's tough to do a lot of nights. But um, yeah, the song came from uh, a very particular day when w- I watched a loved one go into the world in a very public way for the first time in clothes that matched how they saw themselves and who they are. And it was so courageous, and it was like it was such an act of courage and of integrity, because to me, I mean, it's the definition of integrity is the outside and the inside matching, being the same, not being it's integration. And The outside matching what's on the inside. And watching that, had never been as proud or as terrified of and for this person that than I was that day. And as soon as they were out of my sight, um, is when I wrote the first line that I wrote for the song, which was the line you quoted. I want you free, but I need you alive. And I think that's a real anxiety that especially allies, and not just allies, and queer folks. I mean, people all over that, in all those different relationships are going to feel when it comes to their people who they love having to be in an extremely dangerous world, and it is an increasingly dangerous place. 2025, no matter where you are in the world, really, um, it's not safe, and it's especially unsafe for certain people. I mean, there was just a video that has been making its way all over Nashville, which is where I live, about a trans person being just violently assaulted. It was on camera in a self storage place, and everybody. I mean, it's like you see it like it happens constantly, and so and so while your heart leaps at the idea of someone, um, you know, demonstrating the courage required to express the full scope of who they are in the world in a public way, and how proud that makes you. It's a direct proportion to terror because which is like why the song starts with by saying like it does not require bravery to face the world as I am. And yet I see you weighing life and death every day in your skin. And it shouldn't require that. It shouldn't be an inspiring moment of courage and integrity and bravery to simply go out in any public space
Mhm.
as the person who you are.
Mhm.
That
And
that
especially in a church, I think.
Well, and obviously, and especially in a church,
Mhm.
yes. I mean, because then you're inviting a whole other layer of judgment and attack. And yet, where did we say before? Where would Jesus be? He would be with marginalized people.
Mhm.
And these are precisely the people who are
Mhm.
who are being marginalized. And so yet to come into a space that advertises itself, if you want to take all that literally, as a safe place for marginalized people, regardless of which margins they're in and for what reasons, to enter a space like that as a marginalized person and be surrounded, if you want to look at the stats of a lot of churches, by a lot of empire aligning people, a
Mhm.
lot of straight white people,
Mhm.
and to be further marginalized
Mhm.
in a space like that
It's not safe.
is it's extremely unsafe, and it's insult to
Mhm.
injury. I mean,
Mhm.
it's so confusing.
Yeah. So, one of the things I find that's been so unfair is, uh, for people in the LGBTQ plus community who still want to practice their Christian faith.
Yes.
Like, there are plenty who do, plenty who don't. We're
Sure.
all in different lenses, but there are plenty who do, and I find it very offensive that people have told them that they don't have a right to practice
Mm.
their faith in community that is safe and affirming and growing. And so it's like, what do we do about this? Right? Like,
Right.
this is going to continue. One of the things that I've found is a website called Church Clarity. And
Mm.
it actually is, you could type in a local church or your zip code, and they clear churches if they are open and affirming, if they have women in leadership. There's all sorts of
Yeah.
things like that. And they're all different denominations. And there are thousands of churches just in the United States that are on there. And I
That's
think
great.
that's maybe one of the things, is just thinking about, like, that again, like, the churches that are not open and affirming are there, but there are so
Yes.
many that are. And so how can we say, "Hey, if you are in a marginalized community and you don't want harm and you know what, you want to continue to be able to practice your Christian faith, where, as my reverend says, if your daughter grows up someday and brings in a woman as her girlfriend, no one's gonna bat an eye." That's what my
Right.
reverend told me this week. Like, that's where we need to get to, because
Right.
it's more loving and inclusive, and it exists already, but I don't think that people know about that,
Yes.
right? So
Right. Yeah.
what can we do?
Well, and like you said, one thing is to not compromise on that. To not say to yourself, "Well, but I really wanna this particular expression or this particular ritual or this particular gathering, this is so important to me that I'm willing to compromise and put myself in a potentially unsafe position." Um, Hold out. Like, don't compromise on that, because, as you said, there are those communities, and even if there is not one, it's because, unfortunately, again, the church, the institution of the cultural institution of the church, has gotten so it just like it had when Jesus showed up in the first century. It so mimics empire, and it so mimics it looks so much like it at this point, that these kinds of changes, it's for a ship as large as Western Christianity to pivot. It takes a really long time. It takes a lot of people on leaning on one side, and it just takes a long time. And so that's why some people say, "Oh, well, that's just fringy people and like fringy, it's like fringe." It's like, right, but I mean, that's precisely what Jesus's movement was in the first century. I mean, it was seen for a hot minute as a dangerous and fringe and unorthodox thing. And don't go there, and don't go close to that, because that's awful. And that's like that you're going to go straight to whatever. And really, it was like Jesus coming in and saying, "Oh, well, you've heard this said, and you've heard this for thousands of years, and you've heard that this is your whole religion is defined around, you've heard this said that it's this way. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not that way, it's this way." And so for thousands of years, your whole religion has literally been hinging on something that you've misunderstood fundamentally. And like, we need to be open to that still being true. That there are still things that we might be so fundamentally misunderstanding that we're practicing the whole thing completely wrong. And you have to be open to, but it just takes a long time to turn it. And it takes a long time to change that. And so the majority practice of it is still going to reflect these very large, outdated, heavy, empire aligning values and priorities. Um, and so, yeah, don't put yourself in an unsafe position. But hold and hold out. Maybe there's I can tell you for a fact that there are online communities that maybe you could start with, and say there are online gatherings that you can participate in a meaningful way, who will tell you the truth about who you are in the eyes of God. If that is important to you, then find that community. And I think that's a great resource, that you named. But it's like, and so the thing I say to a lot of my especially younger queer friends who do have a serious spirituality that they are pursuing, and a Christian evangelical spirituality that's important to them. The thing that I find myself kind of saying maybe to them as advice more than anything is, like, don't let anybody tell you that you can't exist and that you
Yeah,
cannot be as
that's right.
complex as you actually are.
Mhm.
You hold all this together in your physical body, and your physical body is a challenge to what they are saying. And it's like, it reminds me of something that Jennifer Knapp, who has been a friend of mine for 20 more
Oh,
years.
I love her. She's been
Yeah.
since the beginning. She's
Yeah.
been one of my people.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
and
her
I've known Jen
music.
forever, and we got our start, Kate, my old band, and like, we all kinda came up around the same time, and we've been
Mm,
friends for a super long time, and she's still a great friend. And when we were first touring together, after she had come out and come back to the United States after a long break and long hiatus, I would hear people come up to her and challenge her, like, in a theological way. And this is what you're gonna get when you're maybe a queer person and you're trying to continue to practice a Christian spirituality. You're gonna have people challenge you with theology. They're gonna say,
mhm,
they're gonna try to basically put the burden on you to explain yourself. Explain why you think this is okay. Explain, here's a Bible. Explain to me why you think it's okay that you're this way. Justify yourself to me, as though that is your job to justify yourself to anybody, but especially another random person in church. But the point is, what Jen would say, and I used to love, and Jen is extremely intelligent, and she can obviously have that theological conversation if you want. But what she would say to people is, I am not here, and it is not my job to justify myself to you theologically. What is important that I am doing is I am physically holding in my body all of these realities at one time. And that's what you have to reckon with. Because as I stand before you, I am a person who's attracted to the same sex. I've been with I'm a long committed, loving relationship with one partner for decades, and that is my person. That is who I am. I'm also here to tell you that I have an immutable belief in Jesus and who he was and what he taught. And you might say that you cannot have both. I am here, my physical body challenges what you're saying. My argument back to you is not theological. I'm not here to try to explain myself. I'm just here to say, this is in fact the reality that I'm holding in my physical body. So it's a physical argument that I'm making. Like, like, you're calling me a unicorn. You're saying I cannot exist, it's not possible. And I'm here to just basically say, sorry, but, like, here I am. I mean, I just am here, and I am all these things. And so, especially to my young friends, I mean, I tell them, like, don't let anybody reduce you and simplify you. And you're complicated. All the best things are. All my favorite people and things are complicated. I'm extremely complicated. And so you're complex. Like, you contain multitudes. Like, there's a lot of things going on, and they're not all going to fit together in ways that are going to make a lot of sense. And that doesn't matter. It's not your job to make sense of them. It
mhm,
is your job to hold them. And if somebody else tells you it's your job to make sense of, and demands even that you make sense of them, that does not mean anything. That doesn't mean you have to do it. And it doesn't mean it has to even be possible. Because maybe the version of Christianity that you're still working your way through, that you might still need to sort out some things, might not even make sense to you, with who you are right now. That also doesn't matter. You can continue to practice it and sort it out as you go. You can, and there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work. They're going to help you in that regard. I think of the movie 1946, which is
yes,
a tremendous, great resource. My
yes,
friend Rocky, who made that
amazing.
movie,
Oh,
you know, that talks about the fact that in no language of the Bible had ever been translated into, the word homosexual had not been in it before the 1940s. That's an extremely new idea.
mhm,
And even the people who translated that version and put it in there are now saying that it was kind of a mistake. That's not.
mm,
It didn't go on to mean what, and all the meaning everyone's put into it now, justifying all these behaviors and all this rejection and all this unwelcome and all this restriction and all. And so it's like, let it be complex. Allow yourself to be complex. Don't be tempted to believe that you have to simplify yourself in order to exist, in order to be welcome. You don't. You don't have to simplify yourself. You need to be as complicated as you are. And you might be holding together a lot of really complex things. The hard work you have to do is just to hold it,
mhm.
just to hold it in your physical body and just to stand there and just to take up that space. And if somebody else, just tell people that's your job. It's not my job to explain myself. If you need to explain me, I don't know, go for it. Might tie your brain up in a knot because I'm complicated. But, like, don't put that on me. And if this is a community that doesn't welcome complexity and doesn't welcome all the things I'm physically holding together in one space, then cool, please let me know, because you're clearly not tapped into anything that is truly spiritual or otherworldly, or what you're believing can't save you, and it can't save me.
And there might be another community just down the road.
And in all likelihood there is, and if there's not, there for sure is somewhere. And the idea that there is anywhere means that does exist.
Yeah.
You are not the only one, but it's hard work. It's hard work. It's a lot to ask.
What is your hope for this album, for people who listen to it and connect with the songs?
Yeah. My greatest hope is that people would find it, and that people would know it exists, and that it would get passed to folks who might need it. And that's literally my highest hope for it. It's not for everybody, and I don't need everybody to know about it. I don't need everybody to listen to it. Again, it's complex, and it's for complex people. But what I would love for people to do, if they're finding this, if they're hearing any of this, is it's 40 minutes of your whole life. It's not a long album. It goes by pretty fast, I think. Listen to it and either receive the affirmation, receive the knowledge that you are not alone, and that what you're feeling is completely normal, and that you are loved, and that you are necessary, and that, like, receive all that if that's you. And if not, listen to it and think about who might be somebody in your life who might need to hear this, and just take that extra step of firing them off a quick text or a quick message on social media and with a link, and say, hey, I thought of you when I heard this, and I thought maybe this could help, and this might be empowering for you. I would just love for you to know these things about yourself. Think about who you might want to say it to, and who those people are who you care about in your life, who maybe you're concerned about, and share it. I mean, that's really it. Like, that's my highest hope in the world, is that it would travel a person at a time to people who might need it, and that those folks might find it. That's it. I don't want to be on Jimmy Fallon. I don't want to be a household name. I mean, I've been more famous in my career than I'm ever going to be in the future. Right? I've done this job for a very long time. At this point, I just really, really want the folks who this is for to find it. And that's going to take everybody. That's going to take everybody. That's going to take people interacting with it, listening to it, and putting the thought and care into, who do I know that might need this? And then taking that extra step of sharing it. That's it.
That's beautiful. And I also think that it's helpful for people who maybe don't fully understand, but want to understand, maybe someone in their life, to be able to just start taking the approach of, like, when we don't understand something, let's approach it with curiosity. Just open curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Instead of, this is not because I don't understand. It's like, well, I don't understand. Let's learn, and let's see what other people have to teach us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like, even if you think that you're really not gonna like this record, and it's really not gonna be where you're at because you don't have whatever it might be, you might be very surprised that you do resonate with the underlying feelings and emotions of caring deeply for somebody, and being concerned for somebody's life, and caring about how somebody you love is treated. And, like, you might be surprised to find that you do resonate with these feelings. And if you do, that might be the bridge across which you might be able to understand how this might feel to a family member, a friend, a loved one, a father. And maybe you find yourself mixed up in those emotions, and it might help you to better understand, as you were just saying, somebody who you think you have nothing in common with and could not possibly relate to. You might be surprised. You might be surprised how much you can relate, and how much we are all people, and we are all feeling and processing the same grief, the same fears, the same concerns, the same search for hope, for our people. Yeah, just it's music. Just listen to it.
Derek Webb, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
This world was never meant to hold you. does not recognize your face. It twists and it tries to control you. In one there is no shade. So you speak in other tongues, march to every drum they're beating, to hide in view. But sometimes you forget and nearly break your neck. The whiplash is killing you, 'cause you don't feel safe unless you stay in your place.
Thanks for joining us today on The Sacred Slope. May the fruit of the Spirit blossom in you and guide you this week. To nominate a pastor, priest, or clergy member for the show, email me at alexis@thesacredslope.com. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and download wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Alexis Rice.
I could not have imagined I could wake up with the sun. These days I'm taking coffee orders long before my friends on the east side. Waking up. Even 18 months ago the colors all were gray. Warring with my family and all the words I had to try and say. To cut my way free. Thank God a friend knew just what to say to me. Oh, I was there too. It won't be this way forever. Someone's our emotion, oh, you don't have to cover up. Sometimes scars are as literal as rants and notes, and they always show up down your arms. 'Cause there's a cost that must be paid to tear down these walls you built just to keep you safe. And I was there too. It won't be this way forever. Forever. The conditions of love in the calligraphy of pain, you had to write it all down so you'd never be the same. You may not have noticed me, oh, we all look the same. When you're feeling the weight of the world, barely 13 and fighting for your life every day. But when you paid for your coffee or your shirt sleeve got pushed up, probably nobody noticed just before you pulled it down and your cheeks got flushed. But on your face, oh, you too.